fans, this is Taylor McGregor here. You're listening to my good friend Kyle Stanley's Setup Man podcast.
Hey, Setup Nation. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have Taylor McGregor. She is the Cubs reporter on Marquee here on our show. So I usually wait for fan questions till the end, but we had two fan questions that I have to start with in the beginning. And I'm sorry, I might mispronounce this guy's first name. I think it's John Siambi.
Oh, no.
It's
No.
He says, "Why do you hate the RBI?" John, how do you pronounce that, Taylor? First of all, is it Shambi?
Oh, my gosh. He would. So the backstory behind this is hilarious. So
Okay.
it's John Shambi for everybody who doesn't get the joke, and that
Boog.
is Boog on the Cubs broadcast. Truly one of my best friends in the entire world. And the joke here is when he first started, I would say I was not as far along on my statistical awakening, if you will,
Okay.
as I am right now. And with that, I challenged him on the ideal that RBIs matter
Mm.
and couldn't believe that he didn't think that they didn't matter. And then here we are. That was in 2021. Now fast forward to 2024, and I am like slapping my 2021 self, thinking, "Oh my gosh, I can't even believe who I used to be." And the big joke is like, now I make comments like that to people, like, guys are not getting paid for RBI, and to be honest, I don't really care how many RBIs they've driven in, so, like, let's move on. And so it's just kind of a joke of just how much I've evolved in my viewpoint of the game, and, in large credit to him because I think he sat there, those 3 years ago and kinda was like, "Oh, don't worry, Taylor, like, we'll have these talks over time," and in his credit, we have, and I've definitely changed my viewpoint on RBI and a lot of other things in this game, to be fair.
You are the Babbitt Queen now.
The Babbitt Queen.
Well, and then I promised a second fan question. This one's from Mr. James Deshays.
Oh boy.
So he said he heard that you have a good singing voice. Will you sing us a song? Come on, putting you on the spot. You got to
No,
do
I
one.
will not be singing, but God bless the two of them and everybody else on our crew, to be honest, because I greet them on the bus sometimes with my wonderful slash not so wonderful vocals. And I love to karaoke. I love
There you
Whitney
go.
Houston. So, maybe if you ever see me at a karaoke bar, I'll sing for you. But until then, I think I'm going to refrain from singing on the pod. Jim
I
has a
like it.
great singing voice as well. He's musically inclined. Give him credit
Okay,
where
well
credit's
then I
due.
gotta get him back on here and ask him that question.
Yeah,
We'll throw it back
exactly.
on him. And we're gonna get to Cubs talk here in a second, but I do think it's really important for people to understand your story, where you come from. And until you actually do some research, you don't really realize that you came from not only a baseball family, but a very major baseball family. And your dad was the former president of the Rockies. And um another thing that a lot of people don't know is that your dad really suddenly passed away. And that I can't imagine how tough that must have been. But how much does that play a role in your decision to get into this career of being a sideline baseball reporter?
When I think about my journey and why I wanted to do this, it was sports overall, and football and baseball were certainly at the top of the list. Being able to watch college football and then the NFL with my dad on the weekends is something that I'll cherish forever. And those memories are what drive me in a way. Like, I want to be a voice for the young girl at home watching football with her dad. And then
Mm,
when it comes to baseball, for me, I always say I kind of learned through osmosis. And because in order to spend time with my dad, I had to go to the ballpark. Easter's and Father's Days and Mother's Days were all spent at the ballpark because my dad was working and that's where we had to be. And
right.
so I learned the sport and fell in love with the sport because that's what I needed to do to spend time with my dad.
Okay.
And so to your point about me choosing this career and maybe choosing this career after my dad passed away, I certainly think there is an element of being around the ballpark, being around sports that brings me closer to the feelings I had as a kid spending time with my dad. And I try to never take that for granted of just how grateful and cool that is for me to just experience that on a day-to-day basis and get paid and create a career out of this. It's certainly something that's super special, and I'm very grateful to my dad for showing me these wonderful sports and planting these seeds into my head early that, hey, I could do this one day.
Well, I think so many of us have a family tie to becoming, whether it's a sports fan, a Cubs fan, or just, a fan in general. There's deep emotional roots of that, and no more emotional than, suddenly losing a loved one. And so I just appreciate you sharing that. As we do go over that, I do want to make a really sharp transition into the Cubs. You are so close to the team. And I want to start with some of the relevant stuff that's going on right now. Let's talk about Adbert Alzolay. After he blew that save against the Marlins, just coming off the field screaming, looking like, the world had ended, essentially. I mean, you can just tell this guy is taking this very difficult. Knowing Adbert, how much do you think this is impacting him beyond the baseball field?
Well, I think there's a level of frustration for any athlete when they're not performing to the standard that they hold themselves to. I think with Adbert, he is such a team guy
Mm,
and he loves being around his teammates. He's charismatic, he's a big personality. Not being able to perform for yourself is one thing, but not being able to perform for your teammates, I think hits entirely different. And to me, that's where a lot of the frustration is probably coming from of, hey, your team does their job of getting yourselves into a position to win a game, and then you're the one who goes out and blows it. And that's, I'm sure, a really tough pill to swallow. I've never experienced it, but that's my perception of the way that he feels. And all of that in addition to the self standard that he has for himself. So I do kind of understand the frustration of letting people down and not performing to the standard that you hold yourself to. And that stinks.
do you get a close-up look of just how the team or the coaches or he himself are working to try to figure this out? And if so, what have you seen that process look like from Advert?
Yeah, I think again, I wasn't there this weekend, but everybody's always trying to improve. And let's go back to a couple years ago where a lot of people questioned the decision to even make Adbert a closer because he couldn't get lefties out. He really
Mhm.
struggled against lefties. And there was an evolution with the slider and locating it in different parts of the zone for different counts and the way he evolved as a pitcher to inherently be able to neutralize both sides, both hitters. Getting back to what makes him good, I'm sure that's the focus out there in the bullpens day in and day out.
Well, the bullpen is just one of the things that fans are wondering about right now. The other thing that they're wondering about is when Justin Steele comes back, what is this rotation going to look like? And already you've seen Ben Brown get moved. And I bring this up to say Kyle Hendricks is just, 4-5 starts actually in a row now to start the season has not been good. And from a just leadership standpoint, it seems like the guy takes full ownership. So my question is, from behind the scenes, what does that look like? What does the ownership look like? More beyond than just like, him getting up in front of the camera after the Padres game and just straight up saying like, hey, it's not good and I need to figure this out.
I think it's exactly what you see on camera
Mm,
is the way he is in person. One
mm.
thing about Kyle, in my time covering the Cubs, he's always been accountable. And this is a guy in 21 and 22 really had his struggles. 23, it was a bounce back year for him, and he really put together a nice season. And then this year, more of what we saw in 21 and 22. So with that, I've seen him searching. I've seen him be incredibly accountable, incredibly honest about what he's feeling and his frustrations and the things they're working through and working on, and him saying, "Hey, this is not good enough, and I expect more from myself." And just going back to the team aspect, I don't know if there's anybody on the team who wears it more when they're not able to produce for the group of guys than he does. He is obviously a veteran on this team. There are a ton of young guys who really, really look up to him. They value his experience. They value everything that he has to say. And so, to be honest, it's kind of tough to watch from my perspective because I have so much respect for Kyle Hendricks,
Mm.
and he is just the easiest guy to deal with. He's so kind. He's so consistent, and those are the guys you root for. So it's been hard to watch him hit these bumps early on.
I want to transition to Ben Brown. This guy had a wild route right to the majors on day 2 of the season
Mhm.
unexpectedly because of Justin Steele going down. Comes in a tough situation, has a pretty bad second inning, but has just been locked down ever since then. What have you seen from him in the dugout to just be able to evolve so quickly and be such a major piece in this pitching rotation and bullpen?
I think for him, a lot of what he deals with and handles is his mental aspect of the game. And I've had a ton of long conversations with him
Mm,
about the work that he did following the injury last year, how rough that was for him when he wasn't pitching well. He gets injured, and then all these expectations and hopes that maybe he would make his debut a year ago were not there. And you have to wear that and you have to wonder what's next. And he kind of said, I had to really step back and realize that I couldn't ride the highs and lows of a baseball season because unless you're a Cy Young Award winner, there are going to be highs and lows as a pitcher. That's just the
mhm.
reality. And so he kind of said he really worked a ton on removing himself from the highs and lows and just trying to be as consistent as
Mm.
possible to hopefully help your play be as consistent as possible. But when you're not riding the highs and the lows, it opens up a lot of different things.
How do you not ride the highs and lows, right? That sounds like something that's really easily said, but tougher to be done. Does he tell you how he works on that
Yeah,
himself?
yeah, he's really into his faith. He's a Christian
Mm,
and talked a lot about his relationship with God and how he goes there and realizes that's the most important thing in his life. And baseball is not. And there are going to be good days and bad days. But if you can work on trying to find neutrality through all of it, you're going to be better off in the long run. So, yep, for him, it's his faith, and he's got a good perspective there.
that's cool. Another guy that Cubs fans have really started to get to love already is Michael Bush.
Yeah.
I got to see him at spring training, and no matter if it was a day that he was supposed to be there or not, he's out there working at first base, and it has paid off. I want to know from you, now that the season has started, do you still see Michael going out there and working on his craft before the games? What are the things that he's doing that have been translating now into the games to be one of, if not the best hitter on the team so far?
I think what's made the Cubs defense good the last couple of years is the consistent work from everybody out there. And Jonathan Moda is huge in handling that day in and day out. So I have seen the consistent work from Michael Bush. And I've talked to him about the transition to first base, and he was bummed out a couple weeks ago when he was, unable to come up with some of those picks at first base, which,
Mm,
let's be real, that's a tough transition. He played first base a little bit in college. But then coming up to the Dodgers organization, he really didn't. And
right.
so it's coming back, learning a new position, learning all the different things that come along with playing with Dansby, Nico, Christopher Morel, or Nick Madrigal, whoever it's going to be at third base. He talked about arm angles and knowing their tendencies, and those are all things that I think he's still processing. So the fact that he's been able to play a solid first base and then have the offensive start that he's had, it's been so impressive.
You have had the pleasure of being right there, front row to two Cubs players coming in from Japan now, Seiya Suzuki and Shota Imanaga. It feels like the transition period that we talk about with these players is almost non-existent with him. But you tell me, have you seen the transition be easier for Shota? Has it been just as difficult for him, just like it was for Seiya? What's been the difference that you've seen?
Well, I think he has a little bit of a leg up on Seiya because there's another Japanese presence in
Sure.
the
Yeah.
in the clubhouse, and that was something that I think we didn't talk enough about with Seiya because I don't know if we really even understood just how challenging it was for him not having anybody else to talk to. Imagine going to a different country and nobody else spoke your language. So the only time you could communicate with anybody was when you had a translator present, and sometimes how lonely that could feel. And especially for Seiya, who's a very outgoing, he's a hilarious, he's a fun-loving guy. I'm sure that was really, really hard. And he made some comments where it kind of broke my heart, just thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is hard." And so I think Shota is lucky that he has Seiya here with him. And to Shota's credit, I think he studied up a lot on the Cubs, was very prepared. He wants a connection with the fans. And I think there's little things that he can do and he has chosen to do that probably lift him up as well. Even just the way the fans have received him after the Ben Zobrist comment, his
Yeah.
walkout
That's cool.
music. I mean, the shirts. I'm sure there's an element that fills up his cup as well, you know? And so, yes, it's been so much fun as a fan to watch what he's doing to kind of immerse himself in the community. But I think there's an element for Shota that it's probably important for him to feel a connection in the ways that he's doing so.
A good question here from WJ on YouTube. What has been the biggest difference that you've seen with Craig Counsell and how he handles the team compared to David Ross?
Well, I think the obvious one, and I think this is apparent to fans, is just a little bit of the differences in personalities. You know, David
Mm,
Ross was Mr. bubbly and outgoing, and there was a charisma about him. And I think Counsell is a little bit more reserved. But I also think he's sneaky funny and has like a sense of humor about him that people don't expect. And I think, to me, like, if we want to get really down to the nuts and bolts, the biggest thing is experience. And Counsell, I thought Carter Hawkins said it really good on the Cubs broadcast the other day when asked, like, what are the tangible things that Craig brings? And he brought up how he'll talk about stuff that's going to happen 8 to 10 days in
right.
advance, and how we need to start thinking about it and be prepared for that. And that's not even something that Jed and Carter had, been considering. And so I just think the forward thinking and the way that he views the 40-man roster, not just the guys in the big leagues, is interesting. And a lot of that comes with the experience that he brought to Chicago.
I love it. All right, Taylor, this has been a joy. We're going to end with our rapid fire session. We call this
Yes,
our 27th out. I've got 5 questions here, and I just want the first thing that comes to mind for you to go ahead and give me the answer. And Taylor, guys, has not been privy to these questions.
I
So
have
this
not,
is
and
going
so
to.
I'm a little nervous.
All right, you ready to rock?
Let's do it.
Who's the funniest guy on the team?
Oh, Mark Leiter Jr.
Ooh, that's a surprise. Okay. Um, have you seen Mark Leiter Jr. or any guys pull any pranks either on you or anyone else that you want to share?
Jan is constantly pulling pranks on me. He's also a funny guy, so I don't even have all the. I'll tell you one the other day that he did to
Okay.
me. There was gum sitting out in the San Diego clubhouse, and he comes up to me and goes, "Yeah, you need some of this." I'm like, "Oh, great! So you're telling me my breath smells? Thanks."
Oh, no.
I mean, he was kidding, I hope.
When Go Cubs Go comes on, do you sing along?
Of course,
Okay,
yes.
good.
I love
Is
Go
there
Cubs.
any players that you see like always singing along, maybe like to themselves or straight out loud?
I'm sure there's, the Christopher Morels. I thought one of the coolest moments a season ago was when Miguel Amaya, I was
That was
interviewing,
really
and,
cool.
and he just like was singing. And the only thing I knew to do was just stick the microphone in his face. I was like, I think the fans need to hear this, because I think there is an element that people at home forget, that these guys are fans too. And they enjoy
Mhm.
moments like that, just like the fans at home do.
Okay. Next question. Have you ever seen Ian Happ smile?
I feel like Ian's been smiling more this season. Maybe
That's
it's because
good.
he got married in the off season. I don't know.
There you
Maybe
go.
really that brings that out of him. But yeah, it's the joke that he doesn't, but he does. Ian's a
Okay.
really, really nice guy, and there are some smiles there. We just don't maybe get to see him very often.
There you go. Last rapid fire question here. What is it like? Tell me the experience of a Christopher Morel hug.
Oh, just genuine is the way I would describe it. It just feels like when he comes to give you a hug, like he really wants to hug you and just let you know that he cares, and I appreciate that.
Cool. We have one final question, and it is not a rapid fire question. It's just a fun one that I want you to tell me why, not just the answer, but also why. You're stuck on an island, all right, and you have to get off. Who are you bringing along with you? You only get to bring one person. Who are you bringing along with you to help you get off that island? Boog or JD?
Oh gosh. I feel like both of them bring different skills in different ways.
Don't give me the politically correct answer. They got to hear this.
Well, Boog actually is a really good swimmer. He swims all the time.
Okay, there you go.
So maybe I just have to lean him, because he could swim somewhere and get something for us to get off the island. Not that I would ever suggest just swimming out into the middle of the ocean, but he's a really good swimmer. So that's something people probably don't know.
Okay, that's good to know. Taylor McGregor, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you for joining us here on the Setup Man podcast, and go Cubs go for the rest of 2024. Appreciate you.
Yeah, it was so fun to be on with you. Thank you.